Hey everyone, it's Mentor Mama. Welcome back to the Coffee and Bible Time channel. I'm so excited to be with you today. I normally host the podcast for Coffee and Bible Time, and you have a special treat in store today because I am interviewing one of my very dear friends, Rachel, and we are exploring the Psalms from a mental health perspective. And this all started back when I was actually a small group leader. Rachel was in my group, and when we broke for the summer, I challenged our group to go home and read the book of Psalms over the summer and to record everything that they learned about God's character. And at the end of the summer, Rachel came up to me and said, "Ellen, I am so glad that you asked me to do that exercise. And you know what? I'm going to let her tell you why. But what I also want to tell you is that our Psalms devotional that we developed here at Coffee and Bible Time was really greatly influenced by this whole story. And I am so excited that the Psalms devotional that came out in January of this year is now back in stock. The first order that we placed went so fast, so if you would like to be part of our Psalms devotional study, be sure to check it out online. Welcome back to the Coffee and Bible Time podcast. This is Ellen, your host, and today we are going to discuss how the book of Psalms can help our mental health and emotional well-being. You know, the Psalms encompass such a wide range of human emotions, from joy and gratitude all the way to sorrow and despair. And they provide this means for us to express feelings that might be difficult to articulate otherwise. And they're also just a source of deep spiritual insight. They contain prayers, praises, and reflections that can deepen one's understanding and relationship with God. In addition, they contain practical wisdom and moral teachings that you can apply to your everyday life. They offer guidance on living a righteous and faithful life. And you know, ultimately, the Psalms encourage such deep reflection and meditation, and they invite readers to pause, to ponder, and to engage with profound spiritual truths. And today I have the privilege of welcoming back a very dear friend of mine, Rachel Schlesinger, and she is going to share with us her experience of adventuring through the book of Psalms. So please welcome Rachel.
Thank you, Ellen. Great to be here.
I'm so excited to have you back on. We will put a link in our show notes because I had the opportunity to talk with Rachel one other time, and you will love that podcast as well. But Rachel, for this one, let's start back to the year that you and I were in Bible study together. And it was time for our summer break. Share with us how you came to spend your summer studying the Psalms and how you went about doing that.
Yeah, so I don't know if your memory is any better than mine. I was trying to place the year on this. And so I feel like it might have been about 2013, around that time. And one of the reasons I think I even know that is the little journal book that was given to us by you that summer had a copyright date of 2013 on it. So I'm thinking that's about the time that it was. But yeah, we had this challenge, and it was to glean. That was that word, to glean through the Psalms. And I still have everything, and it's such a joy to look back on that. And so I have that little paper that encouraged us to read one psalm a day in any order you wanted, and just to write down what you learned about God's character and his ways, or write down a verse or summarize part of that passage. And that is where it started. And for me, when I started to look back on this, Ellen, I was like, Psalms was my first love. And you know what they say, you never forget your first love. And that's really where it started down to me. And so I ended up like writing all, because, you know, you got to pick any order. And so then I was losing track of where I was. So I'd write down like on the back of my paper every chapter and then mark them off when I had been done and kind of see where my time was. Did I have a lot of time to read a bigger one, or, not enough time and read a smaller one? But, I can still picture that time in my life. I lived in my townhome at the time. I can picture the chair I sat in to read those. My oldest was,
Mm.
I think, about 2 at that time. So I'd have to wake up, before him and try to time that and guess what that would be. But that was the start of it all. And we'll get through some of it on this podcast, but anytime we've been in conversation or I've been in conversation with friends, Psalms always comes back up because, like I
Mm.
said, you just never forget that first love.
And I will never forget, Rachel, the look on your face when we met then the next year. And I remember you saying, "Oh, Ellen, I'm so glad we, had that summer challenge to read through Psalms." And it was just, I could tell from just how the look on your face, how you had gleaned so much from it. Well, as you were going through it, what recurring themes related to emotional well-being did you notice throughout the Psalms? Because, so many people right now are challenged with emotional well-being, and what can we take from what you've learned that might help someone?
Yeah, when I was thinking about the themes of the Psalms, I kind of put it into 3 basic categories, and it's that God's in control, he greatly loves us, and there's a period of waiting. And so, God talks about that He is our dwelling place. He's near to us to seek Him when we're troubled. He hears, He knows, He answers us. That's prevalent through all these Psalms. And so, there's even time that He addresses there about feeling like we've been forgotten. Did God forget about me? Does God know what I'm going
Yes.
through? And that even when you're in those times, that he's still worthy of trust and praise, and to look back at what he has been faithful in, to know he will be faithful in the future. And so that's that part of God is in control. And thank goodness that he holds us in his hand through that. The other part is just the love, that his love endures forever. There's nothing we can do right or wrong to earn or to lose that love. And that there's this yearning, in Psalm 84, it talks about yearning to be with him, yearning to be home. And this love that's just not complete without God. And so those times we have those yearnings in our life, that's this theme that God's talking about to us in the Psalms. And basic truth is that I'm loved. I'm dearly loved. I'm wanted by
Yes.
him. And so, and then too, the waiting. And there's so many times that he gives examples of this. Psalm 40, verse 1 talks about, I waited patiently for the Lord. That means I had to wait and we didn't like it. There's all that through there.
Mhm.
Psalm 27:14 talks about wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart, but wait for the Lord. And so when it terms of mental health or mental emotional well-being, that safety net that we crave is controlling the circumstances, controlling the outcome,
Yes.
controlling the future, the unknown, the things we don't know that will happen. And the Psalms really just brings those themes together, that God is in control, that he loves you, and there's a waiting piece to this. um, there's a little more I want to cover back into this later too, but there was a point in time when I kind of just surmised what I learned through all of that. And I think these really go strong with these themes. And that's do not fear, concentrate on trusting God, just do what needs to be done, relax in his sovereignty, Remember that he goes before me and he will bring good.
Mm. Those are such powerful themes that every one of us can have experienced, that we can latch on to, that, God and his word and his faithfulness. It's so hard though in the moment, isn't it? Like
Mm.
when we're just in the depths of not knowing, like you said, feeling out of control, not knowing what the future holds, or in some specific situation that you're in. But I love how in the Psalms it always draws you back. And like you said, looking back on God's faithfulness helps you get through. It really is I can, our only hope. It's what does get you from point A to point B when you're in such a hard state oftentimes.
Yeah, and if I can just expand kind of on mental health, what is mental health, mental well-being? Our mental health is tied to these themes that are all throughout the Psalms. Our mental health as people is tied to our sense of security, our sense of place and belonging, our sense of confidence, our sense of self-worth. That's a big part of our mental health piece. And it's also,
Mm,
mental health is tied to your surroundings, your environment, your basic needs, how busy you are. And when you're in those times, your mental health can suffer because of noise. You can't hear God with these voices, these
mm,
sounds, this noise, and so, you know, such a common or popular Psalm 46:10, just be still. That's my anthem. Always be still and know that I am God. Well, why is he saying that? Because God can and does speak in loud ways. However, I believe most of the time he's speaking to us in this still, soft voice. And so, I'm a health and PE teacher, as you know, and we have this lesson that
mhm,
we go through each year about the ear. And we study that, and we study hearing and decibels. And so there's this lesson that we talk about, 80 decibels is kind of this threshold of where noise starts to become uncomfortable. And over long term periods of exposure to noise and chaos at even just 80 decibels, it can cause damage. And that noise can continue to increase, and all these louder and bigger sounds, and, going from just like a backfire sound or a fire truck sound all the way to like a building collapsing, an explosion, a freight train, those types of
mm,
sounds. Well, anyway,
yeah.
the more those decibels go up, the less you can hear individual voice. You cannot decipher the different noises that cause chaos together. And that leads to stress, that leads to anxiety, and that can just be from an environmental hearing point of view. So
Mm,
when you start to equate that to mental health, it's so blatant that when we have too much noise, we cannot hear God. And
mm,
what's noise? It's too many. We say this with my coworker all the time. Too many tabs are open. Right, I got all these tabs open in my mental computer, and I haven't closed any of them. That's noise. Too many yeses in our life. That's noise. Social media,
yes.
all those things, opinions even of family and friends. That dynamic, busyness, scheduling, and so. When you have that extreme noise, how do you heal the ear? What would you do after you went to a loud concert for a long time? Amazing concert. You enjoyed the noise, yet you felt this reverberation in your ears after. You would be
Yeah.
still. You would be quiet. And so, what can we do to be still and to be quiet? We can physically be still and quiet, but we can soak in the Psalms, and that's for me in that time in my life too, of these themes back to God's in control. He loves us, and we have to wait for him, and we have to be quiet to hear his voice.
Mm, that's such an important reminder. I know I really need that today. And I loved, all the tabs open. Like, I feel like sometimes it does get out of control, the number
Mm-hmm.
of tabs for everything that you say yes to. And we do need to be very conscientious and make good decisions on how busy and noisy our lives can get. Well, Rachel, how did your knowledge of God change and expand from reading the Psalms related to finding comfort and hope specifically?
Hmm. Well, I can remember back to the beginning of our time in Bible study thinking, people always talk about read the Bible. You need to read your Bible. Well, how do you read your Bible? Do you just thumb through the pages and stop where it stops? Do you just pick
Mm-hmm.
one of the books and, just kind of struggling with like, well, how do you actually do it? And I just know that this challenge is what changed for me, to just write down what I've learned about God. That was so easy. And so that baby step, when I look back on the journal that I had of Psalms, it is literally just those things. It's passages, it's just short summaries. I really had this need for structure, so I made sure I never went over one page because I knew I needed to save space in the journal. And it's nothing more than a summary of God. But then when I pick up the journal of the next book I did, which for me was Proverbs, like, wow, well, I did the same thing, but there's these short prayers I wrote at the bottom. And I started to write some of those things back to God, in there. And then I pick up the next one I did. I think I started Ephesians after that. And then I realized, well, I need another journal just for the prayers I'm writing. And so just to see how this baby step of
Mm-hmm.
knowledge expanded and grew with every book, every stage, every storm, every step that I took has grown into where I am now and who I am now. And so, I just see that thread throughout. But also, really, what the Psalms taught me was to dwell with Him and what that meant. When I started this, I was a first time young mom. And there is no more taxing time on your mental and emotional
Mm-hmm.
health than going from independent, self sufficient, selfish woman to needed, covered, exhausted,
Yes.
selfless mother. And that's
Mm-hmm.
draining. And that's
Yes.
very taxing on the mental health. And so I think that time that God put this in my life just let me fill my bucket, not enough that I needed, but He let that time fill the bucket overflowing because He knew I needed more than what I had just for myself. So I feel like that I had extra to give during that season of life when you're so drained because I filled.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, too, is when you go through these storms, and how did this expand from the Psalms, is that you're building this rock, this foundation that you don't know you're going to need later. And to step every
Yes.
day through these things, the routine, the mundane, the missed days, the days you got it on and you feel like you did it right, those are building blocks to stand on, when the storm comes. And so, this way that we organized it, again, just write down what you know about God, turned into me in one storm in my life where I started to prove God was there with me in the storm because I wanted to be able to look back and say He was there. And so, when I would write these prayers, I would go back and put little check marks in my writing where He had shown up. And that might have been
Mm.
as simple as a timing. Hey, I have this going on, and this needs to happen in this tiny window. I don't control it. That's my prayer. And, covered with 100 other prayers. But to go back and be like, oh my gosh, that phone call did happen when I needed to. You miss those opportunities to see His presence. And so
Yes.
I just think that, like, when you document, is what Psalms really taught me to do. When you document, you can go back and see His evidence, and you can go back and see your growth. And that's such a beautiful thing.
Mm, it is. And I love how you pointed out that it is such a simple thing. And I think so many people are so busy that this is something simple that they can do.
Yeah.
And Rachel, I was just thinking of, my daughter Ashley, she just had a baby. He's 4 weeks old now. And it brings me back, thinking back about what it was like and how hard it is and how you have just such minimal amounts of time. And that definitely is something that you can do while you're nursing, even is just, um, pick a psalm and reflect on who God is and what you learn about his character. Well, I
Yeah,
want to
and
talk
really quick, Ellen, just to say too
yeah.
about that in that stage is this idea again of dwelling with him may look so different and feel so different when you have a 4 week old baby. It may look so different when you have kids that are older. It may look so different when you're single, when your career is busy, when your career is not busy, and all these things. And so to know that, to not measure it against someone else, and to
Yes.
be, I think if we're thinking about mental health and emotional security, to be okay when in your mind you failed. I was going to get up early. I was going to do this then, or I was going to do this in bed after I put baby to bed. And then you fell asleep, or then they woke up, or then this happened. It's okay. These dwelling just means there's not a number, there's not a checklist. You don't have to get through everything in this certain timeline. You just have to dwell when you can dwell with him.
Yes. Yes. Excellent. Excellent point. Good reminder for all of us. Let's talk a little bit about King David because he was a prominent writer of the Psalms. What did you learn from how David reflected, how he meditated on the Psalms, and what have you sort of been able to use to improve mental health related to that?
Well, David is such an amazing example because he probably had every range of emotion and situation in Psalms. So it is a smorgasbord for everyone. Whatever you're feeling, wherever you're at, if you're feeling great, if you're feeling terrible, if you're feeling persecuted, if you're feeling, sent by God, he's been all those things. And so what I really think that David teaches is that anyone from anywhere can be used by God. They are loved by God. You can be loved by God. You can sin against God. He feared God. David doubted God, and he was still identified as someone, as a man after God's own heart. And
Yes.
so I just am thankful for this example. If you don't know a lot about David, if you don't know a lot about the Psalms, you think he's this perfect example. But yet, what he teaches through that is you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers to be loved by God and to have a heart for God. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to mess up. You have to seek Him for forgiveness, to free yourself of guilt, to free yourself of these things. And David had to do that. David went from being a son and a brother to being a best friend, to being someone that was being persecuted, to being this great king, to being this adulterer, to being this great king,
Mhm.
this father, and this whole gamut of the spectrum of life. And what David did throughout all those seasons was just love God. And I think back to that word dwell, dwelling is the gift that we get right now from God for the hope that we have in the gift later. When we're in heaven, we dwell with Him for eternity. And so to know dwelling is this gift, it can make these other things in your life seem a little less significant or carry a little less weight when our perspective is long term, this indescribable gift we're getting later. When we focus too much on right here and now and forget our main goal, our main purpose, we get weighed down in that. And so, God's got a plan for me all I have to do is have a heart for it. It will find me. I cannot outrun, out hide, out sin, make this mistake that will ruin this plan that God has for me. His purpose is going to be fulfilled no matter what. And so I just think that David reminds us of that. His pedestal is not his circumstances and his leadership, it's his heart, it's his
Yes.
humility, it's his vulnerability in sin, and he struggled with things many people struggle with.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one thing that you said reminded me of just, I think one thing that weighs us down, our mental health down, is when we don't forgive ourselves.
Yeah.
And the fact that, David, in that sort of whole debacle with Bathsheba, I mean, having her husband killed, I mean, these were very grave sins, and he, greatly repented for them. But you see him throughout the Psalms being able to forgive himself, knowing that God forgives him, and being able to move on with his life. And not to say that there weren't consequences, because there
Right.
definitely were, but forgiveness is so important.
Yeah, at
And
our house, we have this chalkboard right at our garage door for when we leave. And I thought I would change it, over time. And I've decided to not, because it just is such a stark reminder of my unworthiness as a human, my sin, and that God is more. And it says, God can use me in spite of my flaws. And that just sits
mm,
there when we leave, because I mess up. I sin. I see my sin. Sometimes I think I'm better than my sin, all these things. And yet God is bigger than that. And I just find that to be such a freeing forgiveness when we're so hard on ourselves.
yes, and what a great lesson as well for your kids, right? Because they get frustrated with themselves too when they know they goof up. And
Yeah, and you can take that on as an identity, right? And that's the thing with the
yeah.
Psalms, like your identity can be found in these pages. And when your identity says, well, I'm a troublemaker, or I, am not good at this, or I'm that, that's this lie to who we really are. And so trying to really ground your identity in God, in what He says about you and who you are in Him.
Mm, yeah, so important. Well, for those of you that don't know Rachel, she mentioned that she is a teacher. You're also an incredible wife, mother, friend. How have you relied on the Psalms to face different situations in your life, in these different roles that you have, and that would encourage someone who's listening today, who is so many things to so many people?
Mm. Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, you'd never forget your first love. And Psalms laid this foundation in me that I had no way of predicting or knowing. Would just become a part of who I am in my life. And I mentioned, how it carried over in these other books. And so the joy, again, of documenting is that this daily plodding along in the regular seasons of life grew so beautifully that I struggled praying out loud originally, and just remembering what I was saying and not get sidetracked and all of this. But when I write my prayers down, I can slow my brain down. And so to see that grow, it's such a direct line from the Psalms. And when those storms came, they're what I came back to. And so I even think, this little book from so many years ago with all the Psalms, there's so many times that I have come back to this. And maybe it's because something was going on in my life, or maybe I heard a sermon and I was like, oh, Psalm 93. I wonder what I thought about Psalm 93, and to kind of go into that and look, it just was a joy to have this when I needed to go back and see what he said to me about, all that was going on. And two, when there's different types of storms that come in your life. And really, I think the ones that hit you the hardest about the whole purpose that God has for us and when it's life and death, right? And when we get this
Mm.
perspective of death in the end, it changes our focus on what matters here on earth. And so I find that when I was rocked with that, the Psalms are what I drew back to, because they're this portrait of this yearning again, this home going that we're going to. And so for me, most recently, the hardest thing that I had went through was the death of my grandfather. And, we had, he was diagnosis to death in 30 days. And I'm just so grateful to God because our family got a gift that I just don't think anyone else gets the benefit of. And because we knew this day was coming for him, we had this like goodbye weekend. Our whole entire family gathered and we were together with him his last weekend he was alive, where we could, tell stories, sing songs. We sang songs together, and pray together. But I really felt led back to the Psalms during this time of lament and grief and
Yes.
hope. And so, my grandfather, he was this faith filled rock in our family. And I always like to introduce him by saying he was the greatest example of God's love to me on this earth. And so, I, during that time, just felt God nudging on my heart about the Psalms. And so I was drawn to Psalm 84. And I even have it like just written in my Bible that this is the psalm that I've read as a prayer to him and my entire family when we were going through that. And why? Because to pray back these words that God has for us um, is just this depth of feeling known by him. Psalm 84 says, how lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord Almighty. My soul yearns, even faints, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. Even the sparrow has a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may have her young. A place near your altar, O Lord Almighty, my King and my God. Blessed are those who dwell in your house. They are ever praising you. Continues on. But in the crux of that, to feel like the Psalms are what draw that strength of being known and seen, and what God says is true. He can be trusted for the step that we don't know. The greatest anxiety we as humans really face is what he said true. When I die, is this all real? Is this all true? And the Psalms are
Mm.
this rock that you can go to be trusted. And so, that's my most recent greatest example where they've showed up in my life. But Ellen, we've walked this path together a
Yes.
while in friendship, and there's just been
Mhm.
so much, my fast highlights for people going through different situations. There was a time where I was witness to a major car accident. You remember this story, and I had to get out and help someone hurt. And I just was drawn to them in prayer and asking to pray over them while we waited. I mean, that's the Psalms rooted in me.
Yes.
A big pain, a big hurt in my life that 16 years I held on to. God walked me through forgiveness in the most powerful, incredible way. I wouldn't have had that without the Psalms. My dear
Mhm.
friend, her brother's passing was this horrible thing for all of us. And we walked that month that we knew for him was coming with sending Psalms to his wife, prayers
Mm.
daily. and times in my own family when medical crisis has occurred. Medical crisis doesn't actually happen when it's convenient in your own life, when you have time. A lot of times stuff like these things happen when you do not have time, and that's overwhelming. But to come back to this little step that you can take by pulling these truths about who God is will show up for you in these major ways. And just to kind of wrap it around, you know how dear my grandparents are to me. And my grandmother died this
Yes.
past year. And it was very hard for her since my grandpa had passed. And she was struggling to say the prayers she had in her heart. She could not get them out. And so I would write these prayers for her, and I would send them to her like on paper. And she had this
Mm.
cardinal prayer box I got for her to keep them in. And again, they were Psalms, and so it's just from birth through death, all that we face and see. These are the words that God has for us with He's in control. He loves us. And there's waiting that we may not like, but He's in control and He loves us.
Mm. That's so beautiful. And thank you for sharing some of those examples with us, because it really does demonstrate how God's word is active and alive, how it is sharper than a two-edged sword, how it is something that once we can put deep in our heart, we can treasure it, we can use it for our own circumstances, we can use it to help other people. I know the one thing I would just encourage any of our listeners is, if you have the opportunity to memorize one of the Psalms, to have it so that you can just pull it out. I know for me, that's Psalm 23. I pull it out in all different circumstances. And it's amazing how God can just use that one psalm or the different verses of it to encourage and strengthen and comfort me in different ways in various different situations. So try to get that, pick a psalm and get that tucked into your heart. You know, Rachel, I also read through the Psalms that summer, and the feedback that I had received from you and from other people in our group inspired me so much, that I encouraged the Coffee and Bible Time team to actually write a Psalms devotional, which we came out with at the beginning of this past year. And it's a 30-week devotional that covers all 150 Psalms, and it has both guided prompts and self-study. So you can do exactly what we're talking about here. You have the opportunity to read it, to reflect, to be prompted to think about things. So I want to thank you so much publicly just for taking that Psalms challenge and providing the feedback. And I wanted everyone to know that has inspired and encouraged us here at Coffee and Bible Time so much.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, Ellen. Psalms has just been my greatest teacher when I really think about it. And it's where my deep intimacy with the Lord began. And that's where it was born. And it just started step by step with some ups and downs and slow and steady. And that's all you need, wherever you're at with whatever you're coming through. Just show up, and He can do immeasurably more than you can ask or imagine.
Beautiful. Wow. What an awesome way to wrap up our discussion of the Psalms here. But Rachel, before we go, I have to ask you about some of our favorite Bible study tool questions. What Bible is your go-to Bible, and what translation is it?
Well, my go-to Bible actually kind of coincides with the Psalms and my journey into motherhood. Right after my anniversary, right after my son was born. My son was born in June, and my anniversary was July. So my husband had gotten me a mom's devotional Bible, and it's in the New
Oh,
International Version. And so I just feel like this Bible has grown with me. I loved the insight I needed and the little devotionals in there for motherhood and the different stages of it. And so it's just been awesome to grow in my confidence as a Bible reader, confidence as a mom, and confidence as the daughter, of the King.
Yeah, okay, excellent. Do you have any favorite journaling supplies or anything that you like to use to enhance your Bible study time?
I love a beautiful journal. It has to be a
Yeah.
beautiful journal. A fresh one gets me so excited. It's motivating to me. And so, right now, my current favorites are the Rifle Paper Company journals. They're just so beautiful. And I
Okay.
have some flower and bug ones, so they feel summery. Um, so those are great because then too I associate each study or each point in my season. I'm like, I know what journal that was. That was the leather one, or that was the flower tree one, or that was this one.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing, Ellen, this was a gift from you, and so now I still use them, is these Post-it tabs. You remember these Post-it tabs? So you could just write on them. They're these
Yes.
clear tabs. And I use this all the time for scripture references, or, some I have tabbed that said what I learned, different things that I can use. So I have found these to be a really great tool. And the last thing that always accompanies my Bible and my journals and my notes and all that is coffee. Isn't that the theme here? Coffee and Bible time. They go so well together.
Yes. You better believe it. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, lastly, what is your favorite app or website for Bible study tools?
Right now, currently, I'm not using any specific app. I've used Blue Letter Bible and different things like that before. So I'm really into just currently the power of Google. And I say that because I just finished I was so drawn into the book of Acts. I just finished Acts and the history behind it and the growth of the Christian church and the faith and
Mhm.
separate, from Judaism to all of this. And so when I would hear these historical referent things, sometimes would just look them up and just started to become like a researcher, I guess. And so, I'm in Romans now, so it's a little bit different, but I didn't used to do that, if I wasn't sure about a location or something like that. So never underestimate the power of just looking up something if you don't know what it is.
Ah, yes. Great recommendation. Absolutely. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your uh, experience of being in the Psalms in such an effective way that I hope people listening out there are encouraged as it relates to their mental health and emotional well-being. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. What a wonderful thing to talk about with you, my dear friend.
Yeah. All right. And for our listeners, we hope you feel encouraged to start studying the Psalms today. We are offering a special coupon, Psalms Podcast. So that's PSALMSPODCAST to get 10% off of our Psalms devotional that you can find on Coffee and Bible Time. We will have all of that information in our show notes. We love you all. We thank you for listening. Have a blessed day.